This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on G20 Environment, Climate and Sustainability Working Group meeting. The participants are Namita Prasad, the Joint Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of India, and Lalima Naja Dang, AIR correspondent.
As we all know that India has the pride of hosting G20 summit this year, well, it's a watershed moment for all of us, the fact that India is holding presidency of G20. And in that context, we have with us Ms. Namita Prasad, who is the Joint Secretary, G20, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MOEFCC as we call it in short. Welcome, ma'am, to All India Radio.
Thank you so much.
Ma'am, India's G20 presidency heralds a significant chapter for the country, and it is a matter of pride for us all indeed. The summit offers a unique opportunity for India to contribute to the global agenda on pressing issues of international importance. Now, what will be the primary focus for India in this G20 presidency?
History is being made right now as India has taken over the presidency of the G20. It's a moment of pride for all Indians as the eyes of the world are upon us. For a year now, India will be leading and setting the agenda for 2/3 of the world's population, 3/4 of the world's trade, and 85% of the world GDP. India's presidency comes at a critical juncture where the world is simultaneously grappling with the deepening climate crisis, geopolitical tensions, economic slowdown, rising food and energy prices, and the long-term ill effects of the pandemic. The G20 presidency offers a unique opportunity for India as the fastest growing major economy to bring its strengths to bear on the G20 agenda. It is an opportunity to contribute to the global agenda on pressing issues of international importance by offering the unique Indian model of development to the rest of the world, the model that aims to make every citizen of the planet a bhagidar or partner in its preservation and progress. This essence of India's presidency, Vasudev Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future, will be reflected in our priorities. As spelled out by the Honorable Prime Minister, India's presidency will be ambitious, inclusive, decisive and action-oriented. Inclusive growth and realization of the SDGs will be brought into focus. Issues such as finance, energy transition and climate finance, including the role of multilateral development banks, will also be high on the agenda, along with aspects such as life or lifestyle for the environment. The power of digital development will be demonstrated. Globally, 4 billion people do not have digital identities and over 2 billion people do not have bank accounts. 130 countries do not have a digital payment mechanism. India's successful digital public infrastructure model can hold valuable lessons for the world. Leveraging this infrastructure is India's unique digital health model, which includes platforms such as CoWIN. The National Digital Health Mission is another unique initiative. The world is now looking at India to chart a new course of development and prosperity. New India stands ready to take up this mantle and lead the world on a path of sustainable and inclusive growth.
Well, you've very beautifully given us an overview of the entire program. MOEFCC will be anchoring the G20 Environment, Climate Sustainability Working Group. Now, building on the momentum in the past few years, what will be the key objectives or, let's say, expected outcomes for this working group under India's presidency?
In our efforts to tackle the climate crisis, India is walking the green talk by transitioning to climate action. India is the only G20 nation well on track to achieve its nationally determined contributions to the Paris Climate Accords. Further, India's forest and tree cover has been steadily rising. Our balance sheet in implementing the Aichi targets is proactive and forward-looking, and India is on track to meet its biodiversity commitments also. The Environment, Climate and Sustainability Working Group, under the Sherpa track of the G20 presidency, intends to bring an integrated, comprehensive and consensus-driven approach to address climate change and biodiversity crisis and pursue sustainable growth. Cooperation among G20 countries is essential to build economic resilience through resource security, achieve sustainable development, improve ecosystems and biodiversity via conservation and restoration, and combat climate change. The G20 countries, through the ECSWG meetings, therefore builds upon a spirit of renewed multilateralism, linking energy, development and climate action priorities to deliver jobs, growth as well as sustainability. With this in mind, the ECSWG has identified 3 key priority areas for focus, which are arresting land degradation, accelerating ecosystem restoration and enriching biodiversity. The second is promoting a sustainable and climate resilient blue economy. And the third is encouraging resource efficiency and circular economy. Further, India's presidency offers the G20 countries the opportunity to use the life principles to promote lifestyle choices and production practices built upon the pillars of resource efficiency and circular economy aimed at mindful utilization instead of mindless consumption. Sustainable lifestyles and choices can help restore degraded landscapes, promote the conservation of marine and terrestrial biodiversity, and lower global resource use and GHG emissions.
Yes, you've given us the outline or the kind of the points which will be discussed. Let's take them one by one. Let's talk about the coastline first, very naturally, because India is known for its very rich coastline and a vast coastline. And what, according to you, could be the way forward that we could promote a sustainable, and that's a key word, sustainable and climate resilient blue economy to protect the natural environment and the lives and livelihoods dependent on marine resources, not just in India, but if we could do something that we could set an example for the entire world?
That's a lovely question, and the foremost principle towards sustainable blue economy is that of sustainable consumption. This forms the basis of the Life Mission, one of the guiding lights of the Indian presidency. The Life Mission aims to enhance community participation to ensure sustainable consumption and scale up conservation efforts. In this regard, many campaigns like the Puneet Sagar campaign, where NCC cadets across India conducted beach cleanups and enhanced awareness among coastal communities on the benefits of clean beaches, can be seen as an example to the world. Secondly, we intend to further our efforts towards ecosystem-based approaches for conservation of marine habitats, the mission to conserve the habitat of turtles in Odisha, Goa, being a case in point. Our past successes and programs on marine habitats also gives us the confidence that we can successfully implement such programs. Our commitment to restoration of mangroves and coral reefs are some of the steps we have already taken in this direction. Given that India is home to 100 plus marine protected areas and a wide variety of these areas, any Indian effort in marine conservation is easily replicable across the world. Since marine ecosystems like mangroves play a critical role in disaster mitigation and act as carbon sinks, these conservation efforts also help create a sustainable and climate-resilient blue economy.
Let's move ahead and talk of the next point. Ma'am, under the Saudi presidency, G20 countries adopted the voluntary target of restoring at least 50% of degraded land by 2050. How does India presidency plan to take this mantle ahead?
The G20 countries have reaffirmed commitment on restoration of degraded lands through the past few presidencies. For instance, in 2020, under the Saudi Arabia presidency, the G20 countries committed to achieve a 50% reduction in degraded land by 2040 and set up the global initiative on reducing land degradation and enhancing conservation of terrestrial habitats, which is also short form is G20 GIRLD. The Italian presidency in 2021 re-emphasized this commitment and further added a commitment to the land degradation neutrality by 2030 and a commitment to plant 1 trillion trees by 2030 to combat land degradation and mitigate climate change. Further, the Bonn Challenge Declaration and the UN Declaration of 2021 to 2030 as a decade of ecosystem restoration have placed ecological restoration at the forefront of the world's biodiversity and climate change agenda. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, adopted in the 15th Conference of Parties to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, finalized and emphasized on conservation and management of at least 30% of the areas of degraded terrestrial, inland water, and coastal and marine ecosystems, which are under effective restoration, and further, by 2030, at least 30% of terrestrial, inland water, and coastal marine areas, particularly areas of importance for biodiversity, are to be effectively conserved and managed. As such, India's presidency intends to build on the existing initiatives and to create 1. A defined roadmap and action plan for achieving the G20 voluntary commitment for reducing degraded land by 2040 and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework Target 2, which is to ensure that by 2030, at least 30% of areas of degraded terrestrial, inland, water, and coastal and marine ecosystems are under effective restoration. The second is to promote landscape approach for ecological restoration, particularly for areas impacted significantly by human-induced activity, like forest fire-impacted land and former mining sites. And the third is to promote active knowledge exchange between countries to identify and highlight successful land restoration projects and share the tools and techniques, including indigenous practices and traditional knowledge on sustainable land management practices. Further, the presidency aims to promote consideration of local community participation in a framework of empowerment as one of the main actors in the planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of land restoration activities needs to be supported and would entail continuous assistance, socialization, and additional restoration funds in the Global South.
We do have a big job ahead, and when you spoke of land restoration, I was just thinking of the Californian fires and the Australian fires, which have caused so much harm, and so in that context, land restoration does become a very important issue. And another term, for a long time when we talked of environment, it was kind of fashionable. Another term which has now come into focus, and the Honorable Prime Minister often mentions, is it circular economy. Now, how in India, during its G20 presidency, you think we can contribute to enhance momentum for transition to circular economy from linear economy? We know that G20 presidencies have given a focused attention to circular economy over the last 6 years, and India would definitely like to take it forward. How would you outline them, ma'am?
During India's G20 presidency, a shared understanding on deepening the penetration of circularity in steel and bioeconomy would be developed. This would help facilitate G20 members and beyond to adopt implementable action points that would emerge from the discussions. Further, India would also steer the deliberations on EPR in order to widen its reach to serve as a tool to bring in circularity in several waste streams. India would also be proposing to establish a resource efficiency and circular economy industry coalition that would mobilize the private sector in G20 countries to adopt circular approaches in their operations.
Ma'am, Indonesia, under its G20 presidency, had placed emphasis on the blue economy and the importance of collaboration among G20 countries to achieve 30% protection or conservation of global seas by 2030. How does the Indian presidency plan to take this mandate ahead?
We intend to address the issue of protection of conservation of seas in a comprehensive manner by looking at the three facets of the problem and addressing those. Firstly, we intend to understand the problem of marine pollution by means of marine litter, its causes, impacts, and policy measures taken by countries to mitigate the same. In this regard, we intend to continue publishing the report on actions against marine litter with the Ministry of Environment, Japan. Secondly, we intend to directly talk about the challenges faced by marine ecosystems and methods to conserve the same. We intend to carry forward the good work done in relation to these through the CORDAP initiative for coral reef conservation and the Mangrove Alliance for Climate in previous G20 presidency. We also intend to stress the need for ecosystem-based approaches for marine habitat conservation as a part of emerging principles for a blue economy. Finally, we intend to tie all of these together by discussing about best practices involved in integrated coastal and marine spatial planning while addressing the capability gaps G20 countries currently face in this regard. This element is critical as it helps tie up aspects of developing a blue economy and conservation of marine habitats, thus helping us to fulfill the ambition of extracting value from the oceans without destroying them or their habitats.
Well, indeed, we often talk about land pollution, air pollution. It's time that we do focus on marine pollution or, let's say, ocean pollution. We know that there are microplastics being found in fish nowadays, and there's also oceans being polluted with so much of plastic waste. Given that land-based sources account for 80% of marine plastic waste, India has taken steps to address the marine litter challenge, including India's efforts at the 5th UNEA session in 2022 to forge an internationally legally binding agreement to end plastic pollution by 2024, and its domestic single-use plastics ban will help address the marine plastic litter challenge. Will this be highlighted during the G20 presidency, ma'am?
Yes, you're right. Marine litter, especially plastics, is a key focus area of the blue economy priority in the CSWG during India's G20 presidency. In fact, we intend to continue publishing the report on actions against marine litter with the Ministry of Environment, Japan. We also intend to discuss about the various sources of marine litter and how this transnational problem can be effectively solved through collaboration. Further, we understand that participation from individuals is essential to tackle this problem, and India took a lead on this by organizing a mega cleanup activity across 75 beaches to celebrate 75 years of its independence in 2022. We intend to further this initiative by carrying out a similar activity during one of our working group meetings. We also intend to highlight the challenge of marine litter in the Ocean 20 dialogue and discuss the various challenges associated with effectively tackling this issue.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for sparing your precious time to be with us at All India Radio.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on G20 Environment, Climate and Sustainability Working Group meeting. The participants were Namita Prasad, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of India, and Lalima Anija Dang, AIR correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airsdtalks@gmail.com.